Okay, Stuart Stevens, chief strategist. When you look at what we just heard from Steve, and also I'm thinking about what David Plouffe just told me. I asked him if they were thinking about expanding the map, and he said the 7 battleground states we've been talking about are the 7 battleground states we're focusing on. Those are the ones that Harris and Walz are going to, right, starting today. So when you look at that map, when you look at what Steve just reported on, does Tim Walz help? And if so, how?
You know, I think a lot of politics is about sort of narrative arcs these days. What is it? What sort of movie are we going to watch here? And I think with Harris and Walz, you have 2 very American stories. You have her, the daughter of immigrants, come to America. You rise to this level. He's a small town guy. I mean, he's like a walking John Mellencamp song. As Claire McCaskill observed earlier, he is what J.D. Vance pretends to be. And I think that those are very compelling narratives. Everybody knows a high school football coach. Everybody knows somebody who taught geography or history in high school. He becomes a congressman, he becomes a governor. That's something you can grasp and combine it with the power of the first woman president, woman of color. I think that the combination of the two has much more power than each taken by itself. So I consider it a big plus for the campaign.
You know, Maya, I was glad you could come on because you were with a campaign where your candidate was charged in a derogatory way with being liberal. I covered the Bernie Sanders campaign. Liberal on the other side was a dirty word. Now they're calling Kamala Harris and Tim Walz dangerously liberal. Can that land? Can that help them? How do they fight it?
I don't think that that's an effective argument. And because I think, honestly, because people are going to hear what they're saying and realize that the ideas that they are talking about are squarely within what is mainstream. I think that it's an interesting approach because I think a lot of times people say, you know, they can sort of scare people away with the idea of progressivism or the idea of liberalism. But really what we're talking about are really common sense ideas. And when people hear the ideas without the label, everyone thinks it's common sense that students should get free breakfast and lunch at school. Everyone thinks it's common sense that people need affordable health care and affordable child care, paid family leave. These are basic American values that are shared across this country. And so I think that really the danger of an attack like that is that it makes Trump, Vance, and a number of Republicans look even more out of touch and more radical by trying to pitch what sound like common sense ideas as something scary and outside of the mainstream.
You know, John, the other thing that David Plouffe just said to us is that he thinks Donald Trump has, and I'm quoting him here, incredibly lazy schedule. He has only one event this week in Montana. As we know, that there's a day after day after day battleground states for the Democratic side. J.D. Vance is, however, basically following the Harris campaign around on that battleground state tour. This obviously isn't the campaign that Donald Trump prepared for against Biden. But what do you make of this contrast this first week for the combined Democratic ticket?
Well, number one, it's clear that David has joined the campaign now and is an advisor to the campaign, which he was not before, and is absolutely articulating, as a campaign operative would be expected to do, the sort of theme of the week, which is that Donald Trump is extremely low energy and that Kamala Harris and her vice presidential candidate, now we know it's Tim Walz, are extremely high energy. You know, look, I think that you've got Vance, you know, essentially what they call in the profession bracketing Kamala Harris, meaning that he's showing up in the same city she's showing up in and going on attack as the attack dog for the campaign. You know, at some level, that may be an effort from the Trump campaign to get him back on solid footing because he violated, and I'm going to use a visual aid here, the first rule of being a vice presidential candidate, which is do no harm. And we will see if Tim Walz is able to, you know, do that for Kamala Harris. Certainly part of the reason that he was chosen was he was seen as somebody who would not cause a rift within her own party or cause, you know, tremendous angst and anger on the other side.
Okay, so we know the full ticket, right? Let's say you're sitting in the Trump war room. What's your bumper sticker message? Is it liberal, 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 or what do you think their strongest move is here?
Well, I think I'm sorry, Stuart. Go ahead.
Sorry, Stuart.
No, John, go ahead. Well, okay. I think that they're struggling when they say they're going to unleash hell on earth. I mean, that's just so over the top. They have a language problem in the Trump campaign. And that is, in a changing America in this world, how do you talk about things that don't sound like a kind of campaign that Republicans ran, and I ran some of them, back in the late 80s and 90s? Call the other person liberal, put it up. I don't think that stuff works very well anymore. It's very dated. At the heart of this goes back to the fact that what is the Republican message? Not just the Trump campaign. What is the bargain they're striking with voters? That you vote for me and you get what? There's no policy. There's nothing, a program. There's no 100-day agenda as there is now with the Harris Walz campaign, as there was with the Biden campaign. So I think that leaves a hollowness there. And so they end up sort of yelling these your mama too kind of insults. And I don't know how much money Democrats paid J.D. Vance to follow the Walz Harris campaign around, but whatever they paid him, it was worth it, because that contrast, that is not a positive contrast for Republicans.
Well, we did hear from him today. I'm talking about J.D. Vance. He is also, as we say, in Pennsylvania as he follows the Democrats around. And he challenged Vice President Harris for not facing the press. Take a listen.
Kamala Harris, our border czar, is asking the American people to make her the next president of the United States. And yet for 16 days and counting, the American media has been unable to ask her a question.
So, Maya, Harris has had, I think, inarguably a really strong campaign rollout. But is she going to have to face some really tough questions, and when? Pluff wouldn't answer that for me. But I wonder, do you think that she's going to have to sit down, do a press conference, and let the American people hear what they wouldn't have heard from her before Joe Biden stepped down?
Absolutely. I think that she is going to, need to put herself in front of reporters, answer questions, and put to rest an idea that that's something that she's been running from. I think that we also have to remember, as quickly as this has all been moving, that, this is a campaign that has been, happening for just a couple of weeks. She only just officially got the nomination. So this idea that she has been running for a long time and just won't sit down in front of reporters really is not backed up by the facts. And I think that that's, again, them spinning, trying to come up with a message that's going to hit and land. It has not been that long that she's been the nominee. I have all the confidence in the world that she will sit down, like she did, honestly, when she was running for president in the primary. She did that a number of times and handled herself incredibly well. So I don't think that's a genuine problem that she's having to face. I just think it has not happened yet.